The 2015 test was the first one to not have any type of case study. So if you looked at the questions here, you'll notice there's no grid world or marine biology or anything like that. So we can actually look at all four of these questions. With that being said, though, you might notice I only highlighted one of them because there's a lot of stuff in here that's been removed from the 2020 test, such as interfaces, writing a complete class in two-dimensional arrays. Still a lot of good practice, though. Number 3 is probably the best problem for us to review. It's also probably the most difficult. Let's look at number 1 first. When we had our chat session a week ago, some of you were asking about the word static. You'll notice that number 1A says to write a static method array sum. And I put a little note here about that. Static's not going to affect this problem at all. What you'll notice is a static method's kind of like standalone. So there's no class shown here. They don't show us a class or an instance field or a constructor or make any mention of that stuff. This method should be like methods from the math class, like square root or pow, okay, where you can just call it at any time on anything. So this method, since it's static, does not need an object to be created to call it. You don't need an object reference to reach this method. You can call it through the name of the class before any object has been created. As a result, really the only impact that's going to have on us, it's going to be very minimal. Just don't use the word this in your answer. Okay, there is no this potentially. So this method can be called without an object. You don't need an object to bring it here. So the word this doesn't apply. In fact, if I'll show you in Replit, if we tried to put the word this into our code, we'd get an error. Okay, so I'll show you that in just a second. So part A is real easy. They hand you a one-dimensional array. You have to add up all the numbers. It's going to take a couple lines of code. Okay, we've done that probably 20 times together. Part B, a little bit more involved now. The return method here is looking for a one-dimensional array. So they hand you a matrix. A matrix has multiple rows. For each row, we're going to get the sum. Any row of a matrix is a one-dimensional array. So our method in part A, if you handed a one-dimensional array, it gives you back an int. We're going to do that once for each row of the matrix. And as we do that, we're going to fill in the values of this int array. They don't give you this int array. So I know from experience, some of you think that there's an int array here called rowsums, but there's not. That's just the method's name. This is the return type. So first thing I'm going to do is declare this array. I know that the length of it will be how many rows there are, because every row is going to produce a row sum. And then I'll just fill in the int array as I go. And then later I'll return it. And then in part B, now they want to know if the matrix row sums are diverse, meaning you never see the same row sum twice. See, this one would be false because it has 14 twice. This one would be true. When we write part B, we have to use part A's method to do the row sums. When we write part C, we have to use part B's method to compute all of these row sums at once and put them into a one-dimensional array. Once we have that one-dimensional array, then we're going to have to loop through it in a way to see if it's diverse. This is a pretty common algorithm on the AP test. So even though it will be a one-dimensional array, I'll write 2 loops because what I'll do is I'll grab a value and then compare it to all of the values that come after it looking for a match. Once I'm done with that value, I'll grab the next value in the array and compare it to the remaining values. So I'll need one loop on the outside to go through and grab a value. I'll need a second loop on the inside to grab all of the remaining values one at a time looking for the match. As soon as I find a match, I can return false immediately. I won't even consider returning true until I'm 100% done writing the code. Okay, so like I said, part A looks pretty easy. It's just a basic sum or total method, and we'll just loop across the array once, adding values to the sum. This would be most easily accomplished with an enhanced loop. Okay, and so I'll just say sum plus equal to b. All right, and that should do it. Now the real key to part B is we're going to need to call this method. even if you think you can write an answer that doesn't call this method, that doesn't matter. Okay, you have to call the method to get full credit. And the directions were pretty clear on that. Okay, so this method, there is no one-dimensional array. You are responsible for creating the one-dimensional array. Okay, and when you create an array, you have to use the word new, and you have to say up front what its length is. The key to this length is that it's how many rows were in the original array. Okay, and so I'd ask for that ARR2D length, and then later I'm going to return sums. And I just remembered something. I wanted to show you that you can't use the word this in any type of fashion here. So like if you tried to refer to the array through the keyword this, that would invoke an error. All right, so and there's nowhere else that you can use the word this. If you tried to say this.b or something, there's no instance fields that belong to this class. So that's, I think, the main lesson to take is when you're writing in a static method like this, don't ever use the word this. Okay, so some of you are asking about statics impact on our test. Since we're just doing free response questions, that's really the only thing you need to know. All right, back to part B. So now I just want to go across this entire matrix, taking a row from it and then handing that row to my method in part A. So an enhanced loop again works nicely. Hand me one of the one-dimensional arrays that belong to this matrix, okay? And then I will put it into, actually, you know, we're going to need the index, so let's not do an enhanced loop. So you could create your own index, I guess, but might as well just let the loop do it. So let's walk across the array once, and then what we'll do is, and this is why I needed the int I value so that I could say where this is going to go. And again, now I have to call this method. And the key to calling this method is understanding two things. What does the method want from you? Okay, it wants a one-dimensional array. You can get a one-dimensional array from a two-dimensional array if you only provide it one index. It will take one of the rows, one of the actual arrays that belong to that matrix. The other thing to understand is the return type of the method. It returns an int, okay? My array called sums is built to hold ints, so that's a perfect match. Again, you have to call this method locally. You can't call it through the keyword this. Okay, students that took this test, I don't believe were given a name of this class. So writing in Replit, I could call it through the name of the class. Well, I guess they did. So they told them the name of the class, diverse array. So technically it is static if you wanted to reference the method through something, which you do not need to. Okay, you do not need to do this, but you could write diverse array dot in front of that method call since it is static. Personally, I wouldn't do it. I mean, what's the point? I don't need to, so I would just omit that. But if you're just itching to put something there, I mean, that's the only thing you can put. You can't put the word this, okay? All right, and then in part C, is this array diverse? Okay, well, I have to call part A's method. And again, I have to really understand two things about that. I have to understand, what does the method want from me, a two-dimensional array? What does the method give me? It gives me a one-dimensional array. So this method call, okay, is going to hand me a one-dimensional array. So I'll call the method. The method wants from me a two-dimensional array. Well, they gave me one called ARR2B. All right, so now what I was saying is let's pick one of the values from sums. Might as well take the first one, okay? And we'll go all the way across the array. Technically, you can put a -1 there. There's no reason to go to the last value because there couldn't be anything that matches it. But if you didn't put a -1 there, it wouldn't matter. Your code would still work. So if that's confusing you, don't worry about it. But if you want to put a -1 there, you could. But again, it's not needed. The real key, though, is on this interior loop. Okay, this interior loop needs to start one index to the right of where I leaves off at. The reason is we don't want to let the value match itself potentially. So if I started it at 0 again, eventually I might reference the same value twice and think that I found a match when in fact I was just looking at the same number. This one here has to go across the entire array. Okay, so we have to include the last index. Now, why am I saying sums.length and not referencing the two-dimensional array? Well, the two-dimensional array doesn't matter at this point. We only used it to create the one-dimensional array of sums. That's where we're searching for the match. Okay, so now if I can access the sums array at index I and get a match to the sums array at index j, so same array, just two different indexes, right? I and j are guaranteed to be different the way I wrote my code. Then their claim that this is a diverse array has been proven false. Then it only takes one match to prove it false. If you get all the way through those loops, you go to every value of I, every value of j combined with it, and you never dispute their claim, then you can return true. Absolutely do not consider returning true from inside the loops, because we have to let the process complete itself. It looks like my replet's stuck here. So. I'll give it a run just to make sure it's working for you. So I fed it the same test cases, and when we look at part C, we should get true, and then we should get false. That's really the key, and I put in some testers for A and B as well. And again, there's two things just I want to highlight again. I've probably said it 10 times, so you're probably bored of me saying it, but you can't use the keyword this here. Okay, that's the effect of static on this problem. You can't use the word this. You cannot reference a local method with the word this. You cannot reference any of these arrays with the word this. Okay, you should just call them without any reference, in my opinion. But if you just absolutely demand on putting something there, you could call through the class name. And then the other thing I want to emphasize is that in part B, you have to use the method from part A. I don't care if you can do it without calling the method from part A. It's not an option, okay, if you want to get full credit. And you have to use the method from part B in your solution to part C, okay? Remember those two things, and you'll do great on this problem.